we get on top of the first one, which was Blanca Peak. And he goes, 1 down, 53 to go. And I'm like, there's 54 more? I didn't even know. And he goes, oh yeah, there's 54 14ers. And I just went from that date, I literally know it. It's 6 years, 9 months, and 25 days later, I finished the last one. And I can tell you that it took me 2 years to finish the last 11 because they were really hard mountains.
All right, welcome back to the Rain Brings Girls podcast. We're with Kevin Donovan today. He's a local here in Nampa, and I've learned a lot from him already. He's a pretty cool guy. Always adds a little bit of time to my workout experience because we always have great stories to share with each other. Can't wait for you guys to hear from him too. How's it going, Kevin?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. We've had a lot of cool conversations in the gym, so I said, why not take it to the podcast?
That's awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, one of the coolest things, we talk a lot about shooting, and you're a big hiker. You're always putting your vest on, doing some incline stuff. Talked about a lot of cool stuff. So let's just start out. What about your childhood? Where did you grow up? And we'll go from there.
So I was born in New York. My father was an oil company guy, worked for a company called Shell Oil, big conglomerate. And so we moved, and we lived literally in 5 different places in New York. And then we moved from there to North Carolina, then to Georgia, which was, kind of interesting. From North Carolina to Georgia, your formative years. So I have a little bit of a Southern draw because of that. Then to New Jersey for about 6 months. And literally 2 days after we moved there, my father was called into a secret meeting, and said they're moving the headquarters to Houston from New York, which is the big oil company migration. A lot of them moved at that point. And he didn't tell us until they announced it. He told us the night before. So then we moved down to Houston, actually live in a small suburb called Conroe, which isn't a small suburb anymore. I went back there for my high school reunion this year. It was kind of interesting. So it was different growing up. Played football up until my junior year in high school. And it was, everybody outgrew me. I was pretty much undersized. I remember going home and talking to my mom, and my dad was not happy that I was like, I'm going to get hurt. These guys were all big. I was still maybe 145, 150 pounds, 5'6". And all of a sudden, I'm up against guys that are already 200, 225, 250.
Yeah.
And you're just going to get smashed.
Yeah.
So he was pretty disappointed in that. And so Conroe was kind of interesting. We lived in a relatively affluent neighborhood. And of course, with all the migration of people from all over, a lot of not so great things came along. Drugs, alcohol, kind of fell in with the wrong people. Got into it. There was a lot of things like peyote, magic mushrooms. There was even LSD, PCP, marijuana, methadone that were all kind of floating around our neighborhood. And I got into it because that was what the cool people did. And in reality, they weren't the cool people, but that's what I thought. I got really lucky along the way. I actually got set up by a kid who pulled out of the parking lot of an arcade. And the next thing you know, the police are lighting up the car. And he pulls out a bag of marijuana and stuffs it down the seat of my car. So got hauled into jail. And I don't know how my father figured it out, what had happened. And this is at a time when possession of a marijuana seed in Texas could actually land you in prison for life.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy, the laws that were there. And so he must have figured it out because I walked out of there. And the next day at school, I was telling everybody what this guy was doing. Evidently, he had gotten in trouble, and this was how he was trying to get out of it, was by setting people up. Never saw him back in school again. He vanished. So whatever my father said, I never asked him. I never found out, but I dodged that bullet. So I'm 17 at the time, and I start seeing things that are happening. Kids that were doing, one kid was huffing paint, smelling paint,
Yeah.
getting high on the toluene, and he ended up in the hospital. Another kid that was kind of like in that drug culture group, all of a sudden he was being sent off to juvenile detention. And I'm looking around going, you're going to be 18 and there's there's real consequences to what you're doing. And I kind of fell out of that group. Didn't say I cleaned up my act, but I definitely fell out of that group. I didn't want to associate with them. And some of them were literally like their parents were, don't go anywhere near them. My parents were like, they don't want me to be around these people. And so, you're thinking, oh, these are my friends. When they really weren't your friends. They were just trying to suck you into their world. And I didn't want to be in that world. So it became, obvious. I wasn't that great of a student, managed to get by with a B average. And I really wasn't interested in going to college at the time. So what were your options? Well, there weren't many. I'd go into the workforce. I had no job skills whatsoever. I had some summer jobs. I did different things. I'd worked as a mason's apprentice. I worked trimming trees, just whatever I could. And none of those were career paths for anybody. And so I decided I'd go down and visit the Army recruiter. So I'm just about to turn 18, and it's like, you need to clean up your act and get your shit together. So circling back to North Carolina, when we lived there, we had gone to like a state fair or something, some kind of fair, and there was a special forces demonstration. So here's these guys are all tall in the starched uniforms with their green berets. This is in the 1960s. And it was like, I was pretty impressed. Well, and they had this thing called, they had a zip line. They called it the slide for life. At least that's what I remember. And so I did it, and I thought it was like the coolest thing as a kid to do that. And I wanted to go again, but there was no way. The line was like super long, and my dad was like, we got to go. So when I went in and talked to the recruiter, I had other ideas about the military, but I kept looking over, here's this poster, the Special Forces poster. And so I said, well, what about that? And they were obviously looking for people. A lot of people were getting out of the military at the time. And so it was like going into what they have now today, the 18 X-ray program. So it was a direct enlistment. And I thought, all right, I'll do that. Not knowing what I was actually getting myself into. So that was a big turning point. I remember my father was out on the patio, his typical thing, shining his shoes, and he was talking to me about college and, where are you going to go? And I pulled out my contract to go into the military. And my mother was absolutely beside herself. She did not, it was like, I made a decision. This is like your first real adult decision to make. Vietnam was still going on. And so I think the thought of her son going off to war was pretty disconcerting for her. And I remember her taking me and dropping me off at the Army recruiting station or the depot where to get sworn in. And she was crying. She didn't want me to go. And I really didn't understand it at the time, but I understood it, not that long after. It's like, yeah, she was not happy, thinking that I might lose my son in combat or something of that nature. And I was, again, still undersized and small. I was easy pickings for anybody that wanted to beat me up growing up because of my size. And so it was a turning point right then and there. I worked really hard in the military. I wasn't the world's best soldier. I was good enough to get a couple awards along the way. Finished Special Forces qualification course, and our graduation date was 16 days after the fall of Saigon.
So did you go straight into the special forces, or how long were you in the military before you went into special forces?
Straight into it. I enlisted directly into that program. So I went from basic training to their AIT, which was your advanced MOS, which I was a radio operator, then to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. And it was
parachuting.
Yeah, it was like, wow, we're jumping out of planes. And it was, for me, it was pretty cool because I thought, wow, none of my friends were going in the military. None of the people I knew in the high school, very few I knew went in the military because the military wasn't getting really good press at that time.
Right, during Vietnam.
Yeah, a lot of negativity in the media. And you have to remember the media then was ABC, NBC, CBS. That was it. There was no CNN, there was no
news networks.
Yeah, no news networks, no foreign news services whatsoever. There was no internet. So you got what you were fed by the major networks. Jump school, and then from there to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for Special Forces qualification course. So it was not easy. Some people say it was easy. It was not easy. I was small. I'm hauling, I don't remember, 75, 85, 100-pound rucksack on my 140, 50-pound frame. And but I managed to get through the class, and not everybody did. We started out with about 120 people and graduated, I think, 35.
Oh wow! So yes,
so it was
70% dropout.
Yeah, it's pretty small. There is one shift in there. All the medics went for longer training, so the next medics from a previous class came into our class.
What kind of things did you have to do during that class?
So you had 3 phases.
Okay.
And the first phase was you're basically out in the bush. You're parachuting into a remote location. It was up in the Pisgah National Forest. You're doing about a 600 AGL above ground level jump. So the airplane literally pulls up from nap of the earth flying, and you're out the back.
Ooh.
It was pretty crazy. And so that chute opens and you're looking at it and the ground is there. So you've got to, get down on the ground, rally up. And I managed to somehow land in a tree.
Oh,
It was kind of like, dang it, So I'm in the tree and I go through the whole process of getting out of the tree. I'm dropping my rucksack. I'm getting out of the harness and I'm getting down out of the tree. And one of the cadre came over. So you're out doing basically operations. They're giving you locations to go to get your food. And if you don't know how to navigate to it, you're not eating.
Yeah.
So we did that. And then you come back after the first phase for your MOS specialty. So weapons guys went to weapons school, radio operators, radio school, medics left and went to San Antonio, to the military base there. And demolition guys went to demolition school. So you had this training that you would go to based on your specialty. And then you'd go into the third phase, and it was operational. So you're doing operationals with the indigenous, the fake country of Pineland. And you would have these local people that would actually come in and act like guerrillas, and you had to train them. So we broke a few rules along the way. You weren't supposed to do stuff, but we were giving them money to get us beer and things like that. So we had, I think that's part of it. Part of special forces is not to follow the guidelines.
Building camaraderie for being rebellious, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so you did that. You did planned operations. You did mock assaults on various things, and it was good. So graduated from it was Special Forces Qualification Course, SFQC, and we graduated. We had a few days before the actual graduation, but during the final part of Phase 3, we're kind of going back, and it was standing down. That's when Saigon fell, and there's a whole bunch of 20-something and 19-year-olds sitting around looking at this 13-inch black and white TV and watching them fly off of the embassy in Saigon, watching the helicopters getting pushed off of the aircraft carriers. And there were a lot of long faces because probably to a person, most of us had Southeast Asia as our desired place. That's where we want to go. It's like, I'm doing all this stuff. I want to get in the fight. I want to go train with the Indige. So didn't end up where I wanted to after qualification course. I ended up in Signal Company, which was kind of a rear echelon group. However, it was really, I don't know, it was kind of serendipitous that I ended up there. So one day I'm looking down in the wood line, and there's a group of guys out there doing martial arts stuff. They're training, and I'm looking at it, and two guys walk up behind me. And to this day, I remember their names, Mike Kendall and a guy named Chuck Sanders. And there was like, kind of something like, you like what you see. And of course, I'm not that big. And I'd say Kendall was 6'4", and Chuck was 6'2". Chuck's a big guy for, big time martial artist. And they literally picked me up, and I was now in the class with a guy named contractor. His name was Mike Echanis. And so that was one of those life-changing things. It wasn't long after somebody wanted to get off of an A team. He'd been there for a long time, and I transferred. We swapped places. But at the same time, I was still going and doing all the martial arts stuff, all the training stuff with Mike, and it was combat style martial arts. It wasn't designed like soft style or anything like that. It also involved weapons, crossbows, shurikens,
Really?
nunchucks. I actually got to be pretty good at nunchucks after clocking myself in the head probably a few times, maybe some concussions.
Yeah.
And what's funny is beginning about 4 years ago, some pictures showed up that I had never seen. And I think I showed you a couple of those where standing up firing a crossbow. There was a picture of all that stuff that we had, a lot of those weapons that we're using. And that crossbow actually ended up in a photograph in Soldier of Fortune magazine with a story about Mike. So I did that until I got out of the military.
Did they ever use that crossbow for any kind of battle or anything, or was it just kind of something they just wanted to train with?
We trained with it, and
Yeah.
it was like the Walmart, $39.95 crossbow.
Yeah.
Not like the really nice ones you
Right,
see
yeah.
today that you could take out a fairly large animal at 100 yards. These were close quarters. We were kind of out there with some of that stuff, but it was what you wanted to do. Is a lot of the very silent type stuff. We would train at night. We would shirk around buildings. We'd kind of harass the MPs a little bit, which was kind of fun. And they never caught us. They never caught any of us. We would climb buildings and do like, you disappear into a building because most of the military bases, the windows didn't lock. So you could climb up the chimney to the second roof level, the first roof line, and then you could just go in there and vanish. And these were all our barracks, and so they never caught us, but it was kind of fun to play those operations.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of stealth involved in that. So getting down to coming out of the military, I am, 21 years old, done some pretty cool stuff, got to go to a few places, got to go to Spain and Puerto Rico, and trained with Spanish Marines over there. So it was kind of got to see a little bit of the world. Went to actually parachuted into Germany. We flew into England and ended up at a really cool military base. We flew into Canada at one point, and that was the first time I ever had a caribou steak. It was, so it was really awesome. So I'm getting out of the military, having an exit interview with the company sergeant major. His name is Benny Atkins. And great conversation. Guy was really super soft-spoken, kind of a humble guy. And you would never know what belies the man until 2014 when President Obama put a Medal of Honor around his neck. He never spoke of any of this stuff. And and the actions that he took in Vietnam. He was finally awarded a Medal of Honor for that. So it was really kind of interesting to be in the presence of somebody you completely unassuming, didn't brag about anything, really soft-spoken guy. And we had this conversation about, I want to go to college, and then maybe I'll consider coming back in the military. So I did ROTC for a year. I didn't make the commitment, and I did the National Guard also for a year. And then, so I have basically 2 honorable discharges from the military. And I got an Army Commendation Medal, and which they pretty much gave to anybody that was, working hard. And I think it was kind of like, we'll give him one, maybe he'll come back.
Yeah.
And life took a different turn. So kind of circling back to Mikey Chanas, and some of the stuff that I was doing in the military. So we weren't getting a lot of training. We weren't going out and doing tactical training or things like that. So I had a buddy, and he and I would go out and do our own. We had this area, we called it Training Area Zulu. And we had some fairly rudimentary weapons, although he had an M1 carbine. I had a 7mm Mauser and an AR-7 22 caliber, and he had a Ruger 9mm. And we'd set up our own stuff, and we would do our own training because it wasn't something that was happening in the military at that time. Special Forces was kind of like persona non grata. The higher ups in the military, the conventional force generals, they wanted to get rid of them. They actually did. It's like, we don't need these people anymore. They had enough of them with the Special Operations Group. It's called MACV-SOG, which was notorious for like some pretty gnarly operations. The conventional military forces wanted to get rid of them. So it was not the best time to be in the military, and getting out of the military was, let me make a decision. And I kind of thought about it. It's like, there's not a war going on. What are you doing here? Because that's what you wanted to do. And I did a summer job in the oil fields, and then went to college. And I think the first day of college, I looked out and saw all these people that were dressed in all these colorful clothes. And I was like, I don't know if I really fit in here, because all I had known other than that summer was being in the military, where everything was sort of structured. So it was kind of interesting. So along the way, the guy that I used to go out and train with, he asked me if I wanted to come to work with his group. And so that interview was in Langley, Virginia, at the CIA headquarters. And it was kind of interesting. So I looked at the job. I looked at what they were offering. I considered it. He and I talked a lot about it. I went back to his house and kind of talked about all the cool stuff. He showed me a few pictures of things that you're not supposed to see. And because this was a time when we weren't supposed to be in Afghanistan, and we were. And he was basically training the Mujahideen at the time. So I looked at it and I was like, I don't think this is the right thing. And so I didn't go down that path. In the military, I'd gotten into a Special Forces, Special Weapons, hand-to-hand combat instructor course. And that was run by Michael Chanas. At the time, there'd been some people that I knew that were in touch with him, because he was down with Chuck Sanders, one of the guys that recruited me into the class, and some other people down in Nicaragua training the Black Berets, their special operations guys, against the Sandinistas. And so I was like, hey, do you want to go to work down here? And I remember it was about $5,000 a month to be a trainer. This wasn't combat, direct action. And it was very attractive. And so I was like, all right, I'm in. This sounds great. And then what happened was I get a phone call from the individual that was at the Central Intelligence Agency and said, hey, Mike and Chuck have been killed in an airplane crash.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of like a shock, because I was thinking, I may go do this for a year.
Yeah.
And go down there and be a trainer. So you're training them in weapons. I'd be training them in radio operations and in hand-to-hand combat. So the story was, he goes, I think they were throwing grenades out of the plane, and that one blew up in the airplane. Well, let's fast forward to 2023, and their autopsies got released. So we're going way forward. And what had happened was there was a bomb that was placed in the plane. There was a general, a Nicaraguan general named Alagrete, and he was supposedly going to try to overthrow Somoza. And Somoza was, not the best guy either. So I had always thought, after I heard about it, that it was the Sandinistas had put a bomb in there. But I found out from Greg Walker, who's writing a book on Mike, that it was Somoza. And so Chuck was in the plane, Chuck Sanders, and then Mikey Chanas, and then another Vietnamese Special Forces guy named Bobby Nguyen. And they're buried up here in Ontario. So this year on September 8th, which was the anniversary of the assassination, I went up there and took pictures for our group that covers that. It's called Warriors of the Night. It's a Facebook group. So that was like, all right, go up, stand at attention and salute. And like, thanks, Mike, because you changed me. You made me a better person. And it was really unfortunate that happened. So after that, it was like college, no more, it's like there was no more military ambitions at all. Realizing the consequences of doing stuff like that. And at the same time, I don't think I would have been, I would do it all the same all over again. The martial arts stuff was awesome. The military stuff was awesome. It definitely made me a different person. And I remember going home back to Conroe, Texas, and I'd grown. I put on a couple inches. I put on a few pounds. And I had a pretty mean attitude towards people that used to treat me not so good.
Yeah. Did your dad start to come around to the idea after you were done or during the time that you were in?
Oh, my dad absolutely did.
How about your mom?
I think my mom was glad that I didn't end up in combat.
Yeah.
She was happy that it was going. So I came back and went to Sam Houston State University. I started off there. And my mother was actually in college at the same time. She'd gone to college after I'd gone to the military. And she got a degree in political science I guess she was in her 50s at the time. And we didn't have classes together, but I would run into my mom in between classes sometimes at school. It was kind of interesting. It's like, that's your mom? And it's like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, so she was, typical housewife, raising kids. And then she actually went to law school, and she ended up working for a state representative for a while. And then when she went to go back to law school, they wouldn't let her back in. And so that was the end of that. My dad ended up in Saudi Arabia for about 5 years, and my mom was there for 4 years of it. And that was his big ticket for retirement.
Yeah, because he was in the oil field, right? So
yeah.
And you said you had other siblings?
I have a sister.
Did she go into anything military?
No, she was she's CPA, degree in finance, and
okay.
And so that's what she did. She was older. Needless to say, we're not in communication anymore. We're kind of estranged because of, I think it's a lot to do with the alcohol. It's pretty bad. And I finally just had enough. So
yeah.
I'm like, okay. And that being from all the drugs and alcohol as a kid, it's not that there's any reason to say, I don't drink for religious purposes or any other reason. I just rarely ever drink.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like somebody says, it's Christmas. Do you want a glass of champagne? Well, yeah, I'll have a small glass, but that's it. I just don't drink. I don't think it's that great for you. And I've seen how that's affected other people that I know negatively. My son used to drink a lot. He quit. completely. We're kind of on that same thing. You know, it's like, I just don't need it. I had a bottle of sake in the house. I went and got some sushi to take home, and I was like, oh, I'll have a glass of sake with it. I completely forgot to have the sake. So it didn't really matter. It wasn't even it was kind of like, I don't need this anymore. And it's not good for you. And especially as you get older, that whole conversation with people about how they drink. And I have a lot of family members. I went to an uncle's funeral, and it was just like, wow, did you just not get out of your frat house? There was so much alcohol, and I'm amazed of how much they were putting away and how focused they were on that. And I'm like, do you not realize that, you've been doing this for 40 plus years, 45 years, and the negative impacts that it has on your health and your longevity? And so for me, it's, I don't want to do it. There's no reason.
Yeah. Did you drink like in the military and then you just kind of quit, or did you just never really pick up on drinking? I
did in the military and some in college. A couple really bad hangovers along the way that kind of like, I don't think I really want to do this anymore. And then some, it became less and less over time. You'd go out, you'd have a glass of wine. You'd go out, you'd have a margarita. You wouldn't go out and have 4. And I just quit. It's like I didn't even. The last time I think there was some bourbon used around the house was for a recipe that called for it. Yeah. And of course, the alcohol all cooks off. You're just getting the flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. Alcohol is one of those weird things where it's really pushed in the public. It's on every commercial. It's, in every movie, everything, every kind of media. And yet, like, you look at the statistics on it every year of how much damage it does. And you're like, why would you openly push this, knowing that, sure, they put the drink responsibly logo on there or whatever, but like so much damage. And then you guys are just pushing it because you get money, and it obviously is a huge revenue source for companies, but it's such a destructive thing in your life. And then a lot of people can't control themselves, and they either kill themselves or they make really dumb decisions, or they just kill their life in general because, like you said, it goes down a deep hole, and then you lose family, and it's crazy, man. I mean, it took me all my 20s. I was a big drinker my whole 20s, but, once I turned 30, I was like, I'm going to leave that in my 20s. I'm done with this.
So when I was in high school and I turned 18, you could legally buy alcohol. And that was to the detriment of a lot of people, because when you're 16, 17 years old, there were always your 18-year-old friends that would buy alcohol for you. And that resulted in a couple classmates, or people that they got killed in car wrecks. They've been out the lake drinking. They're 16, 17 years old, and then they're driving like an idiot, and they get in a car wreck and kill a couple of them. And everybody's freaking out. Why? Well, they were drunk. And it happened to more than one person that I knew. And that's just not, it's like, really, it's bad news. You hear about all the DUIs and things like that. And then eventually Texas changed that. It became 21. And I think one of the reasons, people were all, they changed it. And well, one of the reasons why was you had a lot of particularly, 18 and to 20-year-old young men that were dying in car accidents or getting DUIs. And so they made it less accessible. And I think those numbers dropped. I don't know for sure, but I believe they did. But it was, everybody's like, oh, you can vote, you can go to war. Well, you can drink. Well, even though those are the cases, you probably don't have the mental faculties to understand what the consequences are of drinking.
Yeah. I remember seeing like some old videos of people, and they're like saying, I think it must have been right after they said you can't drink and drive or anything. And like, this is even America. I can't even drive home after a long day of work, and I can't have a couple beers on the way home. Is this even America anymore? Like back, and it's just like the Southern people and stuff. Is just funny to see. They're like, yeah, we have to wear seatbelts now, and I can't even have a couple beers on the way home. It's just funny just to see, yeah, like how it changes over time.
So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest changes that a lot of people don't realize they have to make, and may have an addictive personality,
Yeah.
and I think you and I both have an addictive personality. We're addicted to going to the gym. It's a positive addiction, and I think that changed over time. From something that was really detrimental to your health to something that's good for your health. So yeah, I'm an addict. I'm a gym addict. There's nothing wrong with that. Um,
How has fitness changed your life for the better?
a lot, especially as you're getting older. It's just a better lifestyle. Longevity. You're healthier. Um, I actually competed in men's physique competitions in my 50s, and that was like the first time. It wasn't like I started off as a bodybuilder or anything like that. It was just, here's the opportunity to do it. I had someone that worked for me, and he was an NPC judge. And it was like, one day we had this room that we'd go into at work. We referred to it as the cone of silence because you have those heavy wood doors and you could just, you could talk really loud there. No one could hear you outside. And he goes in here, take your shirt off, stand like this, stand like that. And it's like, yeah, you need to go to this gym and talk to this guy and you'll do fine. So I did okay. I mean, I did 1 year. I did 4 contests. The first one I got skunked, and every one thereafter I was placing or winning. And in the succeeding years when I was trying to do it, every year it seemed like I had another injury, shoulder surgeries, knee surgeries. I had 4 shoulder surgeries, 2 knee surgeries, and I'm like, really? And so I'd get close. And even this year I was going to try again, and I got really close, and I went on a trip, and I came back sick from the trip, the airplane flew, RSV, I don't know what it was. And that kind of like, all right, you lost all your motivation. All right, I'm done. Maybe I'll try again. But I think it's just fitness is important. And I would do it because it played into all the other things that I would do: mountaineering, skiing, ice climbing, those things, hiking, all your fitness stuff that you do in one area in a gym also helps you in another area. So, as I moved through life, other things, came along. Became a stockbroker. I actually took a summer internship job at a brokerage firm between semesters. I'd kind of lost my path along the way because I was considering going to medical school. I'd gotten my EMT certification. I'd gotten a paramedic certification. I'd worked in a hospital emergency room. I'd worked on an ambulance. And the best thing I could say about working in the hospital ER was it made me see what it would be like to be an intern or a resident. And it's like, I can't do this.
You did this all after your military?
After the military.
Yeah.
College was kind of like, all right, I'm an okay student, but those things that you're learning in school didn't apply. They weren't applicable to what I wanted to do. I struggled through like organic chemistry and some of that stuff, but I had practical skills from being a paramedic.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to do. But then once I saw what these guys were going through, and women too, I was like, I don't think I really want to do this. And once again, my mother, who thought, her son, the doctor, he wasn't going to be a doctor anymore. And she was kind of upset. So I ended up I'd been doing some investing. I ended up with a job at a brokerage firm as an internship. And I ended up getting hired.
How do you go from the medical field to investing?
So I'd just done a little bit of stock investing. A buddy of mine was kind of doing it. And it's like, all right, I have a little bit of money. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's learn about stock options and investing in stocks. And so I became a stockbroker. And I did that for about 11 years. In the interim, I opened up a business. I opened up a retail bicycle shop. I'd been a bike racer. I wasn't very good. I would say you're kind of like pack fodder. So you're always at the back of the pack, struggling to stay in. I won a few races, nothing major.
Like long distance racing, like Tour de France style, whatever.
Some were longer road races, but a lot of them were criterium, which were like short track stuff. And I was also known for my spectacular crashes, so it would leave me with a lot of road rash. So, I remember hitting one, had a flat tire going into a corner, and I slid into the curb and just literally broke the bike.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, cracked my helmet, broke the bike, and that was kind of getting close to the end of it. It's like, I can't do this anymore. You're getting on your late 30s, early 40s. I'm like, oh, man. So I decided to open up a bike shop, put it all together, cashed out my retirement plan to do it. And the first year was gangbusters, making money, hand over fist. Things were going good. And in the interim, I had an employee working for me that was stealing money. He was stealing money. He was stealing bikes. Orders were coming in. They weren't ever getting checked into inventory. They were literally going into the dumpster behind the business, behind the shop, and he was coming back and picking all that stuff up at night. He had a drug problem, and that's how he was funding his drugs. So all of a sudden I look up and it's like, what's happening here? And I had my girlfriend at the time was working for me. She'd been off to like school to how to do all the taxes and all the important stuff that needed to be done. And she was getting the tax bills in and just putting them in a drawer.
Oh, geez.
So all of a sudden I'm looking at this. The bills weren't getting paid. I get served, for a court case. And I'm like, I'm getting sued. Where's this coming from? So once I figured that all out, I had like no options. So I had to file bankruptcy. Well, I was a broker, and as a broker, you can't work as a broker if you're in bankruptcy. So I went to work and figuring out the bike shop and realized that just in inventory alone, there's about $25,000 missing, not including the money.
And that was back in the 80s?
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
So that's like
going
close to 100,000 now?
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s. It was all going on. So so now I have to, I'm working at the bike shop. The girl that was working for me, she quit, broke up his girlfriend and left the business, and cleaned out the bank account because she had access to checking account.
You're getting screwed in every direction.
Yeah, and so now I'm at the point where I actually went to the landlord. I took another smaller space in there and kind of ran it myself. I had some help from a couple guys that I knew that would help me part-time, and I would just pay them as contractors, and eventually it got to the point where I paid off the small business administration loan and the bankruptcy and all that stuff. And I go, I'm done. I got to get out of this. I got to find something else. I had ended up going to work for a buddy of mine who was a general contractor, and it didn't work out. We didn't see eye to eye on stuff. I wasn't the right employee for him, but believe it or not, to this day, we're still buddies. We're still friends. We actually climbed the Grand Teton together with a couple of our other guys that we did. So he's a good guy. He's really done well for himself. And so I'd been a computer hobbyist, and I know two things. I know the brokerage business and I know computers. And I interviewed with a couple firms, two different brokerage firms, about maybe getting hired on. And because I had a bankruptcy in the past and my licenses were expired, I didn't get hired. I think it was more that the licenses were expired. They wanted somebody to step right in. So I got lucky. I found a program that they were doing job retraining for people. And as a veteran, I qualified for that program, and it was to become a Microsoft certified system engineer. So I kind of knew my way around a computer. I had to build a computer to do something that I couldn't buy a computer to do for the business. So that was kind of a, getting in there, tinkering with the stuff and making things. And so I got into the program. And again, it was kind of it was this paradigm shift. You're reinventing yourself again. And this was probably really the last of the reinventions. So I had to reinvent myself. Went through the school. Before the school even finished, I had all my certifications. I had 5 certifications, gave me a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer certification. The school ended. I had about $400 in my checking account, no job, and the mortgage was due the end of the month, the first of the next month. This was in May of 1998. And I landed a job making really good money. I made about, in the first 6 months, I made like $50,000. I bought a new car. I didn't have any, I paid off everything that I owed, which was very little at that time because I didn't have money to spend. And I worked a couple of contract jobs. I went to work for a company doing kind of consulting, IT consulting work, but it wasn't the right fit. And what happened was somebody that I'd gone to school with called me up and they were looking for somebody to go to work for their company. And I was there for almost 8 years. So in the interim of doing all this, I had started mountaineering, started mountain climbing, rock climbing, ice climbing. I had a friend that was into it, and he and I were bike riding buddies, and we're still friends today. I remember when his kids were born, and now they're married with kids of their own. So it's kind of cool to see that progression through the generations. And he had showed me pictures of him on Mount Rainier, actually doing Mount Rainier. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I want to do that. So I ended up going to Rainier, taking a class, didn't summit Mount Rainier on that trip. But one of the instructors was a man named Narwing Gambu Sherpa. He's a legend. He was friends with the Whitakers that owned the company, and he was the first man to summit Everest twice. And during the 1953 expedition, his uncle was Tenzing Norgay. He hauled loads at like 15 years old up to the South Pole at 15. And he's not a very big man. He's maybe 5 foot, but complete badass, complete legend. So here I am. I'm like, whoa, I'm learning from somebody who's, this incredible legend. Very inspiring. Eventually, I just started throwing myself into mountaineering courses. And early in the late 90s, there was an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and I still remember it. I wish I'd cut it out and saved it. It was about people trekking to Everest Base Camp. And my thought was, if I'm going to go all the way to Nepal, I'm going to climb a mountain. So here I am getting the new job. And if my former boss or one of the former employees, probably him, if he hears this, I actually told him a little bit of a fib, outright lie. I had told him that my previous employer had agreed to let me go on this trip to the Himalayas, that I was going to be gone for a month. And so this was like during the interview process. So this was kind of like a condition of employment.
Yeah.
And he agreed to it. So this is 2001. I go over the Himalayas for a month to Nepal. It was really cool, life-changing experience. Stood up on the summit of a mountain that's called Mira Peak. It's 21,247 feet above sea level. You're up there. I had been doing other mountains, some mountains in Colorado, a lot of 14,000 foot peaks, an 18,000 foot mountain in Mexico. So I kind of had this progression of things, and it was a crystal clear day, and you could see Mount Everest. And I'm like, that's next. And so during the next few years, I plotted and schemed and everything else. And I'm living in Texas.
Yeah.
So I'm living in the flatlands.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I was like, you're saying you're climbing everywhere. I'm like, you're still in Texas, though. There's nothing to climb locally. So that's cool.
You're doing rock climbing. But then every summer, I was going to Colorado and climbing 14,000 foot peaks. So there's 54 of those. There's a 58 list also. So I did the 58 list. And I finished in July of 2007, all 58 14,000 foot peaks. And there were a few 13,000 foot peaks in there also that I'd done. But I hadn't even lived in Colorado. And there were people that were living there their whole lives and been, doing it. So I got there and it was funny because, you're this guy from Texas, what do you know about mountains? And I remember one of the guys kind of knew about what I had done. And somebody said, well, they were saying stuff. And so I kind of looked at the guy and said, well, how many 14ers have you done? And he rattled off the easy ones in the Front Range. And she goes, well, how many have you done? And I just looked at him and go, all of them. And the guy that knew goes, boom.
A 14er is a 14,000 foot peak.
14,000 foot peak. And so I don't even know. I've somewhere in the order of around 400 mountain summits. Some are repeats.
Wow.
So, some were like for training, but what had happened, what kind of spurred that on was in the late 90s, I'd gotten married a second time. And probably the best thing that came out of that was my spouse at the time wanted to go climb Wheeler Peak in New Mexico. And so we did it. Got to the summit. And on that day, that was one of 3 major life events where from that day forward, everything changed. I was a different person.
What was so special about that peak?
It was just like it was the first summit. It was the first mountain summit. Getting up there and having this sort of, and it wasn't a particularly hard peak. I'd actually gone back and done it 6 more times after that, from different routes. And I'd go to northern New Mexico. It was an easy drive, or I'd fly to Albuquerque and rent a car and go up and go hike in the mountains for a week, for a weekend or 3 or 4 days. So it was kind of, it was just this, like the whole thing about being up in the mountains. You kind of get it once you get up high. And then my friend Dan, who I was biking with, was one day, it's like, hey, you want to go do some 14ers in Colorado? I'm like, sure. So, I was pretty much still a neophyte. And we made it up a couple different mountains. We did 3 14ers on that trip. And again, same thing. Like we get on top of the first one, which was Blanca Peak. And he goes, 1 down, 53 to go. And I'm like, there's 54 more? I didn't even know. And he goes, oh yeah, there's 54 14ers. And again, I said, there's another list that's 58. And it's like, okay. And I just went from that date. I literally know it. It's 6 years, 9 months, and 25 days later, I finished the last one. And I can tell you that it took me 2 years to finish the last 11 because they were really hard mountains. And in the interim, I had gone to Nepal. I had gone to Wales to climb with a climbing group that we went to Mount Everest. I went to Mount Everest. I went to Aconcagua in Mexico. I'd climbed up in the Cascades, so Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, and Mount Shuckson. So I'd kind of done all this stuff and didn't summit Mount Everest. As you say, it's kind of like the opposite of the Hunger Games. The odds are forever not in your favor. Got pleuritis, which is the irritation of lining of the lung. I literally coughed so hard, I broke my ribs.
So on Everest, you didn't make it to
No.
You tried to go to the top?
Tried to go, got up to about 21,000 feet, really bad altitude cough, and it just got it.
What is it? It's 29,000, right?
Yeah, 29,000.
I've just heard some stories about how it's pretty gross going up Mount Everest now because there's dead bodies places.
Yeah.
And you got to use the bathroom and there's no lakes or anything, right? Or, not lakes, but there's nothing to take it away. So people are just,
Nope.
And then I heard all the stories about the city water that comes off of that to the cities below it is just disgusting.
Yeah.
So it's not really as appealing anymore. It's more of I don't know.
And there's a big effort to clean it up. But this was.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, there's a big effort to clean it up. It's 2004. I was on the Tibetan side. So it was, we're basically going through these towns on our way up, and there's Chinese soldiers everywhere. And you're like, oh man, these are the bad guys. And I was with a British expedition going over, and it wasn't successful, but as I've told people, they go, oh, aren't you sad? You didn't, aren't you mad you didn't summit? It's like, but I went.
Yeah.
Most people talk about it and they never do it. And I remember even somebody, when the first time I was going to Nepal, was like, you'll never do that. And I came back and wasn't too smug about it, but here's the summit pictures. I did it. And I got into other stuff, especially in the mountaineering, ice climbing. Did that started in 2000. And I climbed one day this past year in 2024 before I moved. There's not anything around here, but I also instructed for 6 years. So I got to be pretty good at it. Not really hard, climbing super hard, but I got to be good at teaching people. I wrote a book, a manual, I wouldn't call it a book, a student manual for the Colorado Mountain Club for our students. And I'm still a lifetime member, but I'm not teaching that stuff anymore. I got my rock climbing, one of the indoor rock climbing certifications. I'd become a apprentice alpine guide. I actually did one guiding trip in the Himalaya on Island Peak in Jesse. And the worst part about it, on the hike in, my meniscus tore. And, I tried to summit, but there was no way. It was just too bad. I just couldn't go. I took off that morning with everybody else and I'm falling behind. I'm like, darn it. But you just have to accept, you have to be accepting of the fact that you could do it. So after I retired, I looked at where all my airline miles would take me. Tanzania. And so what's in Tanzania? Kilimanjaro. And for me, it's 19,400. I think it's 19,410. Well, I've been training up in the mountains in Colorado, and it was pretty much all other than one section that was kind of steep and exposed on part of the hiking trail on the route. The rest of it was just a walk up. And I didn't have any problems with the altitude. I actually kind of joked around with the guide, because you have to go with a guide there. And I said, it's time for me to go for a jog. So I'm 15,000 feet above sea level and I'm taking off on a jog. And it was, you're winding it a little bit, but not as much as most people. And then I would stop and I would laugh. And he was like, oh, no. you pole, which means slowly.
Yeah.
So it was a good trip.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that people make getting into mountaineering?
Well, one, they think they can do it on their own. They don't take classes. And I took a lot of classes: American Alpine Institute, Rainier Mountaineering, Inc., the American Mountain Guide Association. I took tons and tons of ice climbing clinics, and I got really fortunate. So Will Gadd, took clinics from him, probably one of the premier ice climbers in the world. He's the only person to have ever climbed Niagara Falls. Really good guy, still solid. He also does a lot of paragliding, and he's just a really good dude. He's from Canada. And then another class from a guy named Conrad Anker. You might know that name. So he's the guy that found George Mallory's body on Everest. So kind of the association with some like Gambu Sherpa and these guys, you're learning from some of the best people. And even though I was teaching classes, I was still taking clinics. I was always in that game of, you don't know it all. You're going to learn something from every clinic that you take, from every climber that you associate with. You'd learn from your friends. You'd say, hey, I learned this or I learned that. And they would tell you and you would tell them stuff, and you would all become, better because of it. So it was a lot of knowledge transfer.
Yeah. I've never done anything that big. I mean, I've done backcountry hunts, and I've been humbled real quick. I mean, I thought that I was in good shape, and I I can say I always tell people trying to get into at least into hunting, like there's two things you don't really want to skimp on, but one is definitely your boots. Because if your feet are gone, like your whole trip is done, and then your optics, obviously, because then the more you can look at the least you have to walk. But yeah, the boots, man, I've had some pretty nasty blisters just from, just like 6,000 feet. That's about the average up here, but man.
Same thing with mountaineering. Good boots, break your boots in well. I know what brands of boots that actually fit my feet, and I still buy the same ones. And every time I find them on sale, I stick another pair in the closet. Some years in Colorado, I would literally wear out 2 pairs of hiking boots. And, it's like, cause I'm just going, I would go. It was great. Cause you could go and on the weekend once I retired, some weeks, especially training for, Kilimanjaro, I was up above 13,000 feet, 3 or 4 days a week. So I'd get up, go up in the mountains, go do a hike, 4 or 5 hours, come back down, get home. And you're talking about starting at dark 30. So I'm home at like noonish, 12:30, because a lot of times it was less than an hour drive to the trailheads. Come home, have lunch, sometimes take a nap, and then go to the gym afterwards. Because what was else I going to do? I was retired. I'm not going to sit around and watch TV and stuff like that. So a lot of days were like that. You did what today? You went up and you went skiing, and then you came back to the gym. Well, of course. And so same thing will apply here. Of course, I'll go to the gym early and then go ski afterwards. As soon as they get opened on the weekdays, I'll be looking forward to that.
You go up to Bogus?
To Bogus. I had 3 days on my pass from Colorado up there. And so I got 3 days up there last season and then bought a season pass.
Oh, nice. You travel a lot for skiing too?
This year I will. I have. 1 year I took 10 days off from work, and I skied. What was it? It was an 11-day trip. I skied 9 days. I got to count them in my head, 8 different ski areas. I skied one ski area 2 days, and I drove all the way up to Canada.
Oh, wow.
So I did 2 days in Canada, and I did like Snow King and Jackson Hole and Big Sky and Bridger Bowl. It was like, all right. And then Castle Mountain in Canada. So I drove all the way, just did this big long road trip. And that was 2020. And I come back and I'm not feeling that great. And I've been at Jackson Hole, and I'm pretty sure I got COVID.
Oh, shoot. So this is like right when COVID was starting?
Right when COVID was starting.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not feeling good. Fortunately, I said, I'm not like super sick or anything.
Yeah.
And I was over it in about a week, and there was no tests or anything, and nothing was really happening with COVID. So this is February. But I think about March 20th, we were all sent home to work remote.
Yep. Yeah, I was snowboarding in Tamarack March 15th, and I broke my collarbone.
Oh.
And then, so I broke my collarbone, called off. I called off to my boss before I even called my wife. And I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure that I just dislocated my shoulder, because I didn't know at that point. I went to ski patrol or snow patrol, and they're like, yeah, it looks like it's out of place. So they set my shoulder back in. Oh. And then after, they started like my neck and feeling down, and they're like, all right, we're done. Like, I'm pretty sure they understood that I had a broken clavicle at that point.
Oh.
But they didn't say anything to me. They're like, yeah, you're going to have to go see a doctor. After they had just set my shoulder in. Oh. And so we're driving all the way back from Tamarack. My buddy keeps pulling over, filling up little bags of snow along the way. And I'm just putting it on every little bump I'm feeling the whole way down. And then I get to his house in Boise. I'm like, dude, just give me like 1,000 milligrams of ibuprofen or something. Like, this thing hurts. So I took like 200 ibuprofens, and he helps me prop up in my little Jeep. And I was like, I'm just gonna drive home. And so I'm driving home. My shoulders just immobilized, just chilling here on, like, I don't know, probably the bag. And then I called my dad, and I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I hurt my shoulder. I don't know. I'm just going to go and sleep and see how it feels tomorrow. He's like, you should just, go get it checked out. And I was like, nah. He's like, yeah, just go get it checked out. So I go over to this little urgent care over here, and they close at 7 o'clock. I pull in at like 6:45, and I'm like, I just need to get this checked out real quick. You guys have x-rays? And I'm like, yeah. So I go back there. She x-rays it, the tech. And I was like, does it look dislocated or what? And she's like, well, the doctor's supposed to tell you all this. I'm not supposed to tell you anything, but your collarbone is shattered.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, okay. Wasn't expecting to hear that at all. And so they're like, you need to go to St. Al's downtown, and they need to operate on you right now because that's the only place that has a trauma center. So then my wife has to come and pick me up from that place, and she drives me downtown. And then they're like, no, you can wait till Wednesday. It's not that dire. So then they didn't give me any meds either from Sunday till Wednesday. They didn't give me any pain pills.
oh,
So I just was switching like Advil and Tylenol or whatever the switch is. And then they did surgery on Wednesday. But then I was out for all of COVID, like, because COVID got called that week, like you said, like the 20th or whatever. And then, so I'm out of work, not doing anything, and everything's shut down now. I was like, oh man, this kind of sucks. I can't go to the movies or anything during the day. Like, it's complete shutdown, peak COVID. But yeah, that was a crazy time.
And I had a shoulder that had pretty much gotten another shoulder surgery. It was a biceps tenodesis. So my biceps tendons are not they're not in the original. They're no longer OEM equipment.
Did it just snap and go up? Is that what happened?
It didn't snap and go up, but it was torn really bad. And so I had to have another one because I've had them done on both arms, and I've had rotators done on both. Some of it's just anatomical. It was the doctor that did the first one said, you're 5 years away from doing it again. You're going to have another biceps tenodesis. And he was right.
Yeah.
So, and they're recovering from all that stuff. Cause I'd been trying to I'm going to go compete. I'm going to compete. And then, all right, your shoulder's dead. You can't do this.
Yeah. Did you ever have any really close calls mountaineering of like falls straight down or anything, or ever get hurt that you had to get?
I got hurt a couple times. So one of them was really kind of not a big deal. I literally stepped in a hole with my left foot, and I did a knee drop on a really sharp rock, and I split my right patella.
Oh, geez.
And it hurt. And I was like, it hurt when it happened. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, all right, guys, I was with a bunch of guys. I said, I think I'm going to go back. And so it was down in the Uray Ice Park. I got out of the ice park, went back to the hotel. I iced it, and I'm going to take the day, all right, we got one more day. I'm going to take the day off. And then 2 days later, I go skiing on it. And I go, yeah, this thing kind of hurts, but I'm still able to ski. And then I get back home to Texas, and I go, I think it was starting to burn. So it's like healing up that healing burn. So I go into the x-ray place, get the x-ray, and she puts them up on the viewer. And I look at it and go, oh, it doesn't take a radiologist to read that.
Yeah.
So I was out of commission for a few months and kind of took my time coming back. And then another time I was out, I did a lot of solo mountaineering, which people go, that's not very safe. And I go, maybe for you, it's not. Because I was thinking I was, better than that. I soloed like Mount Washington in a storm, which is like the worst weather on the planet. And I went down, I'm coming off of this peak. It was Crestone Needle. It's a 14,000 foot peak in Colorado. I'd gone up there. The weather's starting to come in, and I start to go down, and I turn down the wrong gully. And as I'm descending this gully, the snow starts breaking loose. And so I'm self-arresting. And then I'm kind of get down and go, this isn't the right place. And I realize it wasn't the right place because all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of ropes tied up on rocks, and that's a rappel station. So it was like, all right, you got to figure your way out of this. And I could see the storm, the weather's coming in. And I just started traversing the direction that I needed to go. So I'm climbing over rock, through snow, over rock, through snow. Finally got to where I could see my original footprints on the way in. I was like, oof, I was relieved. So that was kind of like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that again. And I remember getting out of there and going to the only place in town that had food at the hour that I got in was the bowling alley in a little town called Westcliff. And appropriately, I had an Avalanche beer to go with it. The other time is like I was rock climbing. This was right before I was going to Kilimanjaro. I was out helping out with a volunteer group, and I was rock climbing, and I was doing a moderately hard route leading it. And I was like, oh, I'm looking at it going, this is great. I can do this. This is well within. And I just got off to the wrong part of it, and I took a really short fall, but my left foot landed wrong and just blew up my ankle. Oh. And fortunately, it was a big bone bruise and some tendons that had been stretched. I didn't break anything. And that was in July. And then in October is when I did Kilimanjaro, and I didn't have any issues. I rehabbed the crap out of that leg. I mean, I was doing everything I could. It was like, all right, you're just going to go on an easy flat hike within about a week of doing it. They gave me a boot. I was out of the boot in 48 hours. It's like, go walk on the treadmill because I was determined not to do it. And that was kind of like the last of my aspirations to do, any more mountain guiding or teaching instructions in the rock world. It was so, yeah, they weren't bad by comparison, because I know people that one of my climbing partners, he died climbing with another buddy of mine who has actually been one of my climbing instructors now going on about 35 years ago. They were out on a climb and he just made a mistake. And I heard his last word were, oops.
Dang.
And so all of a sudden I'm reading in the paper, this article. They haven't released the name, and that was on a Monday, and on a Tuesday they released his name. And the other guy was like, I texted him, hey, you going to go to Arapahoe Basin and meet up to go skiing? And I never heard back. Well, now I knew why, because he was trying to, they were investigating what had happened, and he was pretty crushed by the whole thing. To have somebody that's with you make a mistake and then die in your presence.
What do you do at that point? Does everybody carry a sat phone?
No, they're in Rocky Mountain National Park, and so there's fairly good cellular service around the park. There are areas where there's not. I carry a personal locator beacon, which you turn that on, and it's an emergency beacon. It'll hit like a National Search and Rescue Center in about 3 minutes.
Is that like the Garmin InReach?
It's not the Garmin InReach. It's not smart like that. You can't send any messages. It's just a beacon. And
okay.
It will send it out, and it literally will put you within a 3-meter circle. And I got one of those when they became legal in the lower 48, and I would carry it with me anytime I was out solo. I think they became legal in 2005. And that Christmas, when the Christmas special was on, it's like, I think you ought to buy one of these. So I still have it. I had it recertified. There's newer, better models out, but kind of like hiking around here, it's not like you're in an area where there's not cellular service. But if I was going anywhere where it's going to be remote, it's 6-7 ounces, throw it in the top of your pack.
Yeah.
It's cheap insurance.
Right. Yeah, just a nice state of mind. I know I had the Garmin InReach, and just for my wife knowing that I was in the backcountry, she could at least text me or something, right? but I've never had anything scary like that happen, but I've definitely been solo packing out and like have a meat on your back and it's dark and I forgot my headlamp and I'm just walking out on this trail and I thought I knew where I was and pretty soon I realized I'm turned around and I didn't download the maps on my Onyx. So I'm like just praying at that point, like, please, like, let this be the right trail. I have my bino harness on. I just had to put my phone in there and put the flashlight on and my gun's strapped to my back. I didn't have a sidearm or anything and I had just killed a bear. So I had all the meat and everything on my back and I'm obviously in a canyon where there's bears and other predators. And then you just start hearing any little twigs breaking in the woods and you're like thinking the worst. And luckily I got to a point, actually, no, before I got to the point where I knew I was safe, I knew I was where I was at the truck, but I got to a T and there's like the Forest Service and tells you which way to go. And I was not expecting that at all. And I did not realize what trails these were. I'm like, well, right is right. So let's just take the right trail. I don't know. I'll just, see how it goes. And luckily, like an hour later, I reached the truck, like just popped up on a road. And I was like, okay, this isn't where I thought I'd come out at, but it's at least I know where I'm at. But man, and you're in the middle of the night and it's dark.
I've done the middle of the night thing and I'm hiking in to go do this mountain because I would leave, before the sun comes up. And as I'm walking in, there's a sign right there that says, it's there's mountain lions in the area, and I'm going, and they're nocturnal.
Yeah.
and so every little noise, and I've been out before, and there was some noise, and I'm like, oh no, it's dark, and I'm kind of creeping out, and got my headlamp on, and I turn, and I see a whole bunch of eyes looking at me. I'm like, uh-oh, and all of a sudden, one of them goes, moo. It's a bunch of cows, and
yeah,
it's like you go from this. You're totally relieved that it's a bunch of cows and like,
Did you carry bear spray?
I not in Colorado that much. I did when I hiked like in Yellowstone and places like that.
Grizzly country.
Country. And I'd never carry bear spray again. It's to me, it's useless. I'm carrying a 10 millimeter.
There you go.
There's just no way that because, if the wind's blowing the wrong way, it's going to come back on you.
Yep.
And, I know that I can in a second and a half, I can draw and fire. And that bear, even if he's moving really fast, I'm going to, even if I don't hit him with the first round, it's going to scare him enough that he's going to stop. But at the same time, that's one of the reasons why I got a 10 millimeter was I was hiking in Colorado and all of a sudden I just bebopping along. I listen to an audiobook, but I'd only put one earphone in.
Yeah.
And I hear this noise and I look up in front of me and fortunately it was the south end of a north moving bear, a big sow. And I was like,
Black bear?
Black bear.
Yeah.
My buddy said, oh, you could just yell at them and they'll run away. And I'm like, if the cub's behind me and the mama's in front of me, I am totally screwed.
Yeah, black bears aren't really that big of a worry until you're in their feeding area or it's cub season.
Right.
That's the only time. But otherwise, yeah, black bears, I've come face to face like to a black bear and luckily it was during hunting season, so it wasn't really cub season. But yeah, everybody out picking huckleberries and stuff are always packed,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be scary.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was when I was trained for Kilimanjaro, and that was like on a Wednesday, and I had the 10 on Friday, and I took it to the range, and I got it on Friday. I took it to the range on Saturday and shot it, and I was like, all right, this is going with you. You're going to figure out some place to do it. So, you can't open carry in the state parks in Texas, in Colorado, excuse me, but I got a chest rig. And it's got my nice colorful wilderness first responder patches and a pair of scissors and a pen on them. So, and that's for the people.
Yeah.
so that they don't like, what's this guy got? You don't want them having like this. It was really Colorado had become, especially in the urban areas, a lot of anti-gun sentiment. There were all kinds of rules and laws coming into effect there, anti-2A, and of course, we live in one of the best states in the country as far as that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Open carry, constitutional carry, I think is what they call it now.
Yeah, and I don't think open carry is a good thing. I mean, you're allowed to. If I'm hiking, that's great, but I think urban open carry is kind of like, yeah.
You take away the surprise factor of
Right.
Yeah.
And I have my enhanced concealed carry, which is nice. That way I'm not getting any grief from anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, but like when I'm up in the woods though, man, it's just so nice just sitting back watching the sunrise, just like even before I was really in with faith, like that was about as close as I was getting with God at that point, Like it's just something about it. There's no, you could look up at the stars when it's dark and there's no city lights, nothing. It's oof.
Some of the mountaineering routes I would do, I would get up and go really early because the mountains, the 14,000 foot peaks that are close to Denver would be really crowded. I would leave the house at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to get to the trailhead. And I'd get there about 4 o'clock. Sun's coming up at 5:30 and I'm on a ridge line. So this normal route on this one mountain, Notorious Peak, there's a kind of a semi scrambling route with some challenging parts to it. So most people wouldn't do that. It's called Kelso Ridge. And I can't tell you how many times I've done Kelso Ridge, but I remember getting up there one morning because I knew the route and I'm running up with a head torch and everything else. And I get up there and then you're stopping and, you're up above everything else around you and you watch the sunrise. And I would do the same thing on just some of the other stuff when I was training for Kilimanjaro. Cause now it's into September, the sun's coming up a little later. I'm still leaving at the same time in the morning to go up there and hike. And so mountains are really interesting and, it's very spiritual for me. And I have a different take on all of that. I've told people this. I had someone ask me about, going to church. It's like, what church do you go to? This group of guys I go do firearms training with, a lot of them do church security. And I said, well, I don't do church. And he was like, well, go to church. And it wasn't being mean or anything. And I said, we're all products of our life experiences. And in the past 25 years, I've spent more time in going through Buddhist monasteries and temples and massive World Heritage shrines that were all in Nepal and places in Tibet. And so I don't go to church. The last time I was in church was for my mom's funeral. Spent an hour in church, but I've probably spent 30 hours over that time period or more listening to monks chant and things like that. So it changes your viewpoint on Western religion a lot. It's different where people who are Buddhist and Hindu would cross practice into different things. I've watched funeral pyres on the headwaters of the Ganges River in Nepal. And I remember one person saying, oh, that's gross. And I'm like, no, that's amazing. That's beautiful. The way that these people honor their dead.
What were they doing?
So the funeral pyre, it's a cremation. So it's an open cremation on wood, which, it's done. The headwaters of the Ganges River are near Kathmandu. And so, which is a sacred river to the Hindus. And so as a Westerner, we can't go in there. But you could sit across the river and watch this. And it's like, wow, I was amazed by it and the way that it was all done. It was very respectful. The oldest son would go around and light, like if it was mother, he would light the pyre and go around. And they still grieved, they still cried. It was just like any other funeral. but the fact that it was just the way that it was done instead of sort of this sterilized funeral, version of funerals that we have in the Western world. So
Yeah.
my beliefs come from that. When I'm out in the mountains, I feel closer to whatever spirit, people would say it is God or whatever, but I just feel closer when I'm outdoors.
Oh, I totally feel that 100%.
And so I'm not religious. I was raised Catholic. When I started to find out about all the stuff that the Catholic Church did to people during the Middle Ages, and how really kind of taking advantage of the poor, they would sell them relics, which were nothing. You're going to go to heaven, but you got to buy this relic, and the relic was nothing more than a piece of cattle bone or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And so, people don't understand. It's like, why can't Catholic priests marry? Well, because they didn't want anyone to inherit the wealth of the church. So it's really interesting to look at it from a different perspective. I went to Catholic school, the nuns and the habits, the penguin suits and stuff like that growing up. And then we went to parochial school, as they would call it, what we call public school, which is actually really should be called government school.
Yeah.
So it gives you a different, all those trips to the Himalayas, 4 trips to Nepal, one into Tibet, gives me a different perspective than a lot of people have, because they've never experienced it. And to me, that was kind of like, there were some, I mentioned this, there were like 3 events that occurred in my life that everything changed. Climbing a mountain for the first time was one of them. Another one was, was the first trip to Nepal. And at one point, it had gone into what you would call a monastery, which wasn't much bigger than this room that we're in. And there's a monk there that we'd met along the trail. And he's in this place, and there's some gorgeous, really beautiful gilded Buddhas in here. But it's very rudimentary. And he's going to be there for a month doing prayers. And he blessed all of us. And I walked out of there with some people didn't go that were in our group. There was a girl from Sweden in the group, and she and I went in and walked out of there, and I just looked at her and go, what was that? Not this, if you knew me before I went on that trip and then you knew me after, it was not the same person.
What do you think changed inside of you?
I just think you just got a little bit more spiritual, a little bit calmer. A lot of the things growing up, like, I was small, I was picked on, so I was pissed off all the time. I was angry, and that carried over even into my 20s after I got out of the military. And it took, some humbling experiences, like having a business failure, to realize that, like, you're not invincible and you can't treat people some of the ways that you would treat people, where I was kind of a jerk, to be real honest with you, So if someone sat down with me today and they were saying, hey, I knew you were at 28, and now that you're 68, and had a conversation, they would not recognize that person that was in front of them. It's just, and it wasn't like anything, it just occurred over time. And so those are 2 of the 3 events that changed me. The other one will kind of go backwards, was in the 90s. It was one of the guys I was with had this CD, and it was from the Rollins band, Henry Rollins. And he had a song on there called Low Self-Opinion. And I thought he had written it about me at that time, because I was at a really low point in my life. And I'll still play it every once in a while, but it's more of a reflection than knowing that, that I don't feel that way anymore. I don't have a low self-opinion.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how a song can, like, just change your perspective? I don't know. I feel what you're talking about, though. Like, I had that when I first started this whole thing of stop drinking, and I was going to stop being a piece of shit and, like, actually be like a good person. NF has a song called Hope, and I listen to that thing over and over again. And I don't know if it's because, like, in the lyrics he talks about it's his 30-year-old self, and I had just turned 30, so maybe there's something there. But it's kind of like, you know, he talks about the person that would take a pay cut to do something that they really love, and like that they're gonna be there for their son and all this. And I was like, holy shit, like this is, it was just crazy. But yeah, I could just totally relate to how a song can just change your perspective. That's pretty amazing how music can do that.
Yeah. And I really, I don't know how many times I went and saw the Rollins band, and, was a singer in Black Flag and did some spoken word stuff. But yeah, it's still one of those things. It's like, yeah, I know the lyrics. I probably listened to it. I literally went out and bought the CD that day, and I probably listened to it for, 100 times. And the lyrics are still memorized in my head because it was that much of an impact on me as a person, that it's like, yeah, you've got this low self-opinion. I didn't really like myself at that time. And that changed over time. And it's like, now it's like, yeah, I like who I am. I'm comfortable in my own skin. I have a friend who's going to get she's going to get this. She's going to know, because we've already had a conversation. I said, yeah, you're going to get to learn a little bit more about me. It's either one of two things. You're going to run far away, or you're going to run towards me. It's one or the other. And she'll listen to, she'll know who she is. It's life-changing experiences along the way. And it's so interesting what things come in to impact our lives in a positive way. And it took some time to realize along the way that I didn't always treat people the way they should have been treated. I didn't always do the best actions towards people. I didn't always treat the women in my life, the relationships, in the way that they should have been handled. And, I've had, come back and go, wow, I shouldn't have treated her that way. Or I shouldn't have talked to this man that way, or this person that way. And at the same time, you get that from other people too. Just like the guy that took money from me, was stealing from the business. The girl, cashed out the bank account. Those things don't matter anymore. It's not that I kind of look at those events and go, well, why did he do that? Well, he was a drug addict, and there was no recourse. And why did she do it? Well, she said, it's like, girl's got to take care of herself. And I kind of understand that now. And even though the actions hurt me at the time, at this point, it's like, all right, water under the bridge. I think that one of the hardest, it's easier to forgive others for the things that they've done than it is to forgive yourself for the things that you did. And it took a long time to come to terms with some of them, small things that you did, mistreated somebody, or didn't, spoke to somebody in a manner, a hateful manner. But to finally come back and go, all right, I have to, in order to move past the things where people did to me, I have to be able to move past the things that I did to other people and be able to forgive myself for them. So took a while, but it's there. And so do I treat people like I used to? No. Am I a better person? Absolutely. Do you want to ever do those actions again? Absolutely not. I don't want to, mistreat people. And there's, I kind of, there's a few regrets in there. There was the girl that got away, because I always thought about, you didn't treat her the way that you should have, because, you should have sat down and had a better conversation about what happened, about your relationship and what your expectations were. And instead, it's like I walked away instead of, being smart about it. It was, your stupid male pride that you couldn't communicate effectively. And now I think it's realizing that going forward, even at this late stage in the game, the communication will absolutely be better.
Yeah. Forgiveness is huge, man. I'm trying to learn all that right now. I've recently found, faith and trying to get into a little bit of the church life and stuff, and just trying to understand forgiveness is a rough one for me just from a personal perspective. But, man, it's such a big burden lifted when you can just forgive people and like stop hating, but like you said, like forgiving yourself too is huge, because you can't change anything, and there's only so much that regret is good for at the end of the day. It's a tough pill to swallow, but man, forgiveness is a tough road. But it is very important to forgive, because otherwise you're just having all that fester.
Yeah, it becomes a lot of negativity in your life, and it impacts you personally negatively, and then also your relations with other people, and trying to let all that go and just like, okay, is it important now? No, it's not. Is it important for me to treat the people that are in my life with respect, dignity, to be a good friend? That's far more important. And I'm getting on in years, how many more years I got left on the planet? I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 30 would be great. I always joke about being able to go out skiing on my 100th birthday. Kind of seriously, maybe. Yeah. Stay healthy, but you don't know what's going to get you. You have no idea. So it's kind of that last phase of life. It's like live it to the fullest and let all the petty stuff go.
Is that something you wish you would have picked up on earlier in life?
Absolutely. Yeah. It took a long time to, even into probably late 50s, early 60s to kind of come to terms with all that.
Did you have any issues about caring about what other people thought, or, just the judgment of others? I know that's something that like I've thought about recently, is just, caring too much about what other people think. But at the end of the day, I'm caring about what the wrong people think, because if I wouldn't trade my life for their life, why would I care? But sometimes it still creeps in. Did you ever have anything like that?
Earlier on, when you were younger, there was that. But then I think after time, probably even into my 40s, it's like, you know what? If that's what they think, I'm not here to try to change their mind. I'm not here to grasp their negativity and make it part of my own, because that's what happens. And I don't have anybody here. I don't have a wife, girlfriend, I don't have a lot of friends. I literally moved here knowing like a couple people that lived here. So it's been this process of, meeting new people, getting involved in different stuff. And, it's kind of good. Like one of the guys in the shooting group that I go out with invited me to his house for Thanksgiving, and it was great. His family was there, friends were there, 20 people. Good news was didn't have to cook. Super nice guy. Didn't have to cook, didn't have to clean. Brought the pumpkin pie. I'm good. So that was kind of a surprise, because I really was kind of like thinking, oh, I'm going to do some stuff around the house on Thanksgiving. And instead it's like, all right, I'm good to go. And so that's how you're going to, eventually meet more people, getting to know people at the gym. And then you start like, hey, you want to go do this, you want to go do that. They invite you to do something, getting with Charlie, learning from Charlie, just watching him, and Mary and their great dogs, it's a great place to go. And so me and the dog, that's it for right now. Maybe not, hopefully not forever.
What was it that brought you to Boise?
So I was in Colorado. I was in a relationship with a woman. Our relationship was great for about the first year. After about 6 months, we bought a house together, and then it deteriorated. She's not going to watch this. I'm not going to, so the truth was, to me, she was taking antidepressants. She got off her antidepressants and her personality changed. We didn't have a very intimate relationship anymore. She was focused on other stuff. I was kind of focused on things. And I kind of made that one sort of last gasp, take her on a nice romantic vacation and try to rekindle the romance and talk to her and all this stuff. And it didn't go anywhere. So about 8-10 months later, she was like, I don't want to live in this house anymore. And that was her way of saying, I'm done. And we were just kind of marking time together. We had a dog that she had adopted, and I kept saying the dog is what's holding this relationship together because the dog was awesome. She was another pit bull. And so I bought her out of the house and sat down, pulled up my financial spreadsheet that I keep, started running in the expenses versus the income. And it was a big house in a neighborhood with really high taxes because it had a lot of extras, swimming pools, tennis courts, a lot of open space. And I realized I can't afford this. I can't afford to live here by myself. I started looking for places to live in Colorado, and I couldn't find a house in my budget. I'd made several trips to Bozeman before I had retired, and I couldn't find anything there either.
Oh yeah, Montana I hear is getting really expensive.
It was crazy. So
Thanks, Yellowstone.
yeah, where are the ski areas on my ski pass, And Bogus Basin was on there. And I thought, okay, let me look. And when I looked at the houses here, people here that live here go, oh, they're not, they've gone up so much. I go, well, relative to Colorado, it was really pretty affordable. So I came up here. I flew up for, I think it was about 4 days, went looking at houses and was like, all right, I'll take that one. I found the same house, and I'm just 5 minutes from your house. Mm-hmm. So the area. And bought a brand new house. Nobody had ever lived in it. It was affordable. I could do all the stuff that I wanted to fix up the house, the way I like it. And so that was the move. And so I moved here not knowing anybody really. And it's just I've been here. What are we at now? We're at right at 10 and a half months. And it's been it's been slow, growing your community, but it's growing, and it's growing a little bit at a time, and that's fine. So that's how I ended up here. And people ask me Thanksgiving, it's like, what are you thankful for? And it kind of shocked them because I said, I'm thankful for my property tax bill. And they kind of looked at me kind of funny. It's like, a property tax bill. I said, because it's $7,300 less than last year's property tax bill in Colorado. I don't know what this year's is. You can look them up online.
Yeah.
But I think it was going to go up about another $2,000. So I was thankful on Thanksgiving for my property tax bill of all things. So it for me, from the standpoint of being retired, it's far more affordable. And someone asked me, it's like, well, where are you planning on retiring? And I go, I am retired. Oh, that's what brought me here was, and I like to ski, I like to hike, and that's all available around the area. Unfortunately, not as much hiking over the summer because of all of our smoke and fires that really, affects going out. So me and the dog, she's a trooper. She loved moving here. She's got a bigger yard, more grass, and I just, she's just loves it, which is great. I got lucky. I got the amazing pit bull.
Oh, you got the dog and the separation.
She was my dog because the other dog passed, and so I was looking at dogs. And I just picked her up she's a pound puppy. She's 7 years old at the time. She'd been a rescue return, which you don't know why in Colorado because they don't there's a lot of places that restrict pit bulls. And so I saw her. I saw the video. They had a video of her, and I went down there. I finally got down there after about 10 days. They finally got her back she was in a foster, got her back, and all she had to do was I pulled out a treat. I told her to sit. Told her to be gentle. I put it in her mouth, and she was so sweet. And I looked at the lady, I go, this dog's going home with me. And she hopped up in the car. She was so excited to go for a ride. And she's still very excited whenever we go anywhere.
That's awesome. Yeah, pit bulls I think just get a bad name, or they're just raised bad. But from what I've heard from Charlie and Mary and a couple other people that I know have pit bulls, they say they make a great family dogs. You just have to raise them like any other dog. Don't treat them mean, and they won't be mean.
So I've had people like walk across the street because she's a pit bull. I was going to get her like the rough and tough camo tactical vest. No, I got her the hot pink one. So I'm walking her one day, and like this lady walks across the street, and the next thing I'm down where one of the ladies is sitting in her garage, and all her kids are out playing, and they're running out. Can we pet your dog? And she's just happy as can be to like have all the kids around her, and she's just licking them and rolling over for belly rubs and stuff. And
yeah,
that's what a dog's supposed to be,
right? Yeah, I love dogs. I got a couple myself, but sometimes they're pains, but yeah, they're fun. So what's next for you in retirement? You got any other mountains? Or are you done with mountains?
I'm done. I think I'm pretty much done. There was a plan to go back to the Himalayas to finish climbing Island Peak. That would have been 2023. With moving here, it wasn't in the cards. I had the dog. I'm not going to leave the dog for a month to go over there and do that. And I kind of think it's I've closed that chapter.
Yeah.
Seems
like you're pretty big into shooting now, though, huh?
Yeah, and I really enjoy that. It's good. I've improved dramatically. I've got, I don't even know how many shooting classes I've taken. Taken privates, went to one of Tim Kennedy's classes through Sheepdog Response, and Mike Glover through Fieldcraft Solutions, and then a 2-day class with Bear Solutions with a guy that I really follow. I've taken, Pistol 2 here, took my NRA instructor course, and not really sure if I want to actually teach the NRA method. And then the Bear Solutions course, I immediately signed up for the carbine courses for next year, 1 and 2. So you're always learning, you're always improving. And I think that in retirement is the biggest thing and it doesn't matter what you're doing. I listen to audiobooks, I listen to podcasts, obviously your podcast, and we've got Jocko over there, Jocko Podcasts. And so I'm always constantly getting more information. I'm learning. I don't care what I'm doing. I'm going to always participate. I'm always going to continue to learn. It's just like when I was teaching ice climbing, I was still taking ice climbing courses and clinics from people to learn. So the minute you think you know everything and you stop doing it, you ought to be like the top of your game. And it's like, it never happens. It's never going to happen.
Well, even Tiger Woods has a coach. So,
yeah, that's right.
And
Tiger Woods' coach has probably got a coach too.
Yeah.
That's
my theory too. I mean, like I'm trying to be a fitness coach for people, but obviously I don't know everything. And so I train with Charlie because Charlie knows a lot more than I do. So why would I give my clients the best version of me, which would always be able to be learning the new stuff or learn more stuff that I know, I think that'd always be either learning or you're dying, right? There's no just staying where you're at.
Look at Phil Heath, 7-time Mr. Olympia. Okay. I trained at a gym where he trained. He had a coach. I mean, you're at the top of the game. You're the best in the world and you have a coach. You have somebody. And I think that's part of what I like about going out with this shooting group is the fact that you're getting feedback. Hey, good shots, way to go. Hey, your grip's a little loose. You're doing something. It's like, I'm of the, there's always room for improvement. until you're a guy like Jerry Mekulik and you're the best in the world, then, and that guy's still improving, even in his, I guess he's in his late 70s now, mid 70s, he's still improving. He's still doing it. He's never going to quit. And I've always made the comment is, I'll quit when I'm dead. That's pretty much it. I think that's a good life way for people to live their lives. Is like, yeah, I'm going to keep going. Why stop? Why, if you're going to slow down. I mean, I've definitely slowed down with age, some, but I also look at a lot of people that might be half my age and they can't keep up.
Yeah. I would have no idea that you were 68 until you just told me you were 68. That's crazy.
Well, why?
I was thinking you're like maybe in your 50s, to be honest with you.
I had somebody tell me that one time that thought I was a unicorn. I told him I was in my 50s, and he thought I was in my 50s, and I told him how old I was, and this was just last year. And I said, no, I'm 67. He goes, man, you're like a unicorn. How do you do it? And it's like, well, I don't eat my food out of a box or out of a can. I can't even remember the last time. The last time I think there was any canned food was canned pickled jalapenos to put into another recipe.
Yeah.
But that's like, not like you're looking in your closet and everything is canned corn and canned peas and canned this and canned that.
Right. Well, and you're really active. So, I mean, I know my grandpa is like 82 and I call him a few times here and there and he's like, yeah, just went to the gym. He goes to the gym like 3-4 times a week when it's summertime. He golfs 5-6 times a week. Even when it's wintertime, he'll go to southern Utah and go golfing. Like the dude's just crazy active. And I think that's what keeps you young,
Yeah. I may have mentioned this to you once before. I went to my high school reunion. It was like a class of like 650 and 90. I think the number was 94 of them were already dead.
Wow.
Some of them, there were car accidents. There were other things along the way. But, it was heart attacks and diabetes and, the results of, all the negative stuff from all the stuff that they ate. They ate themselves overweight and put themselves into this, terrible health spiral that what happens is they'll get sick, they'll get medicated, they'll get a little bit better, they'll get sick again, they'll get medicated, they'll get a little bit better. And it's this slow sort of roller coaster decline. And then they're just having, life is miserable and they can't do anything anymore. And that's the thing that I want to avoid. I don't want to be that guy. There was a book called Younger Next Year, and the guy talked about going along, staying healthy into your 80s and your 90s. And when it's your time to go, you just go. You're not sitting there, suffering from, dementia or other diseases, or you're just, you're in a hospice care for an extended period of time. You're just unhealthy. And that's no way you want to live. And you can't take care of yourself and you're relying on other people to take care of you. And I don't want to be that person. Oh, so I like
awesome.
it. I like it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In his 80s and still going out and swinging clubs and going to the gym. I mean, that'll be me. That's kind of me. It's like you'll see me in the gym and hopefully in another 20 years. How old now?
Hey, maybe that's your next thing. You want to go golfing?
I actually grew up on a golf course, and I have this thing. I really suck at ball sports. I can't throw a football very well. I can throw a baseball pretty well. I played catcher.
My grandpa still beats me pretty regularly, so
Yeah.
it's crazy.
The throwing the baseball came into play in the military really well. I got to, if you won the grenade throwing contest, I mean, these were real live grenades, and just threw the crap out of that thing. You got to shoot a light anti-tank weapon. And so I got to shoot the light anti-tank weapon into the old half track that was downrange and nailed that thing. And it was like, I was pretty happy, because it's like, all right, I guess the top 3 or 4 of us got to go out and shoot it. And it was like, sweet, So that was one of those fun moments in the military where you got to blow something up. You know, explosives were good. Anything that would go boom would make me smile.
Yeah, I understand that. I got to throw my first like concussion grenade this year, and those were cool. Like
Yeah.
smoke grenades, concussion grenades, tear gas, whatever. It was just cool. And then shooting the 38 millimeter grenade launchers, you know, those were just cool. But I've never been able to shoot the big stuff like that. Maybe we'll have to go to that place in Vegas where you can like rent the big LMGs.
Yeah,
and,
you can
yeah,
be ready to spend about $1,000.
yeah, right.
Yeah, so they were frag grenades. I mean, it's like it was the real
pineapple.
It was the real McCoy. No, they were by that time they had gone to the ball shaped ones.
Oh, okay.
So they weren't the pineapple. The pineapples I think went out in the early '60s, and then the ball shaped ones came on. Actually, the ball shaped ones they started developing them by the OSS towards the end of World War II. And part of that was they figured every American boy knew how to throw a baseball, so that's why they went that way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then of course they changed them now. I don't know what they look like now. I haven't really paid attention to that, but
Yeah.
it was definitely a baseball shaped grenade, frag grenade, and
No, that makes sense.
you know. And I had a pretty decent arm, and so I launched it. I played catcher, so
You got to be able to make that throw to second.
you got to be able to make that throw to second. Exactly.
When I was in second grade, I broke my nose because I was second base, and the catcher threw it from home to second, and I put my glove up, and it just went right over the tip of my glove and
ouch.
busted me in my nose.
Ouch.
And then I went to the doctor that night, and he's like, "Yeah, it's broken." They scheduled me to get a surgery. My dad's like, "We'll just get it operated on, whatever." It was pretty bad. It was like really crooked. It's still crooked now. I don't know if it went back how it did, but the next day I had a baseball game, and my dad's like, "It's already broke. Might as well play." And so I got my faces all gauzed up and everything, and I go up to bat, and I actually get hit in the head.
Oh, no.
The pitcher had hit me in the head, hit my helmet, but it was just funny. Like all the parents were like, "You guys are gonna let him play? He's got a broke." And they're like, "What's the worst that's gonna happen?
Break it again.
It's already broke." Yeah.
And the pitcher tried to finish you off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's some advice you'd give, younger kids like myself, just to go on throughout, the rest of their years and make something of themselves?
I think you got to find your mentors. And my mentors were all like people that were in mountaineering, because that was kind of the avocation where I got mentored in. I didn't have mentors in business. And I think that if I'd have had a mentor when I opened up a bike shop, somebody who was really working with me and kind of keeping things on the up and up, and this, that was kind of telling me what to watch out for, it may have been successful. But I think a mentor is huge. And whether it's in business or in fitness, in life in general, and is probably one of the biggest things, is to have those kind of people around you in your life. And it's not just one, it could be multiple. So along the way, I've had some people that mentored me and taught me, and they were friends. And sometimes it was just like, you're just following the guy. His Facebook, his YouTube. And so you're kind of absorbing that information. But I think for me in business, it would have been better to have had a mentor. I thought I could do it all. And boy, was I ever wrong. And look at your failures, because from every failure, there's a lesson to be learned. And I can take away from those failures, and I look back and go, without those failures, I would not have the success I have today. I mean, I got lucky. Lucky being in the right place at the right time. I landed my dream job. I was trying to get out of Texas. It was getting too hot in the summer for me. I remember driving out one time and seeing the sign at 115 degrees as I drove up to Colorado to go mountain climbing. And I found a job online. It was New Year's Day. And I went to go, I put in my application, sent all my stuff in, went to go skiing, came back the next day and go, I'm going to call. And I picked up the phone and called, got the recruiter on the phone, said, let me schedule you for a phone call. And it was at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. And going back to, this is in December, going back to the July, I had literally driven by there, and I'll leave the expletive out, but I said, that would be a really cool place to work. And kind of in my head going, yeah, they probably don't need any IT people. And I ended up, I'm on vacation, been skiing, I get the job interview, and a week later, they offer me the job. And I'm ecstatic because I want to get out of Colorado. I wanted to get out of Texas. I wanted to get to Colorado. I want to go skiing in the winter. Because I was taking trips up there to go ski. And I'd bought a house in Colorado. Didn't turn out to be the best financial investment, but eventually I got out of that thing. And I got this great job. I was there almost 14 years. Great pension plan, which those are super rare anymore. And a great, 401k type plans, 403B, because it's considered a nonprofit. It's a government agency that's run by a nonprofit. It's part of the Department of Energy, and was there almost 14 years. Got to do really cool stuff. What ended up getting published, which is nuts, because I'm this guy without a college degree, graduate of the School of Hard Knocks, and I'm writing parts of scientific papers.
Wow.
So, I was like, really, dude, you're published. And I have copies of the PDFs of them, and I know what I wrote. I got to help invent one of the most and build one of the most energy efficient data centers in the world. I spoke at conferences about it. Talked about what we did, what lessons we learned, how we could do it better. It was small, but it was really, it was a tight ship, and it ran really, really well. Some of the things that they did weren't the best, and then we figured out ways to fix it and make it better. And this was like stuff where I'm looking at it and go, I know how to make this work better. And did a few things where it was better to ask forgiveness than permission, but I didn't have to ask for forgiveness because I proved it out with practical stuff. And not only did the laboratory build that data center, they built one that is now the world's most energy efficient data center. So I was there, during this kind of revolution in data centers. I can't tell you, I've probably spoken at a dozen conferences on this over the years. So it was pretty much the dream job. And I remember, telling them I'm going to retire. And I remember one of the guys going, a couple people were interested in my position. A really good guy took it over, but there was like people going, you can't retire. You can't retire. And oh yeah, hide and watch. And so I joke, I retired 12 days before my 66th birthday, so I could say I retired at 65. And a buddy of mine retired the day before I did, and the day after we went skiing together because we'd been skiing together for years. So it was a good gig. It was really got to do stuff that I never would have thought about doing. I learned much. I wouldn't say really invented, but just changed the way that data centers were operated around the world. People started seeing what could be done to make them more energy efficient because they are a huge user of energy. I think the number was about 3% of all the United States energy is consumed. Electricity is consumed by data centers.
Wow.
So it's huge. When you think about the Facebooks of the world, how massive they are, the Googles, the Yahoos, Amazon, the massive data centers that consume a lot of energy. And to make them more efficient, it's a big deal. And of course, it's, bottom line efficient.
Yeah, we have that huge one going in Meta out in Cuna now. That thing's huge. I can only imagine how much power that thing's drawn. It's like a small city out there.
And they'll do so Meta, of course, is Facebook, and I've seen, their data center management people would speak at the same conferences, and we would see what they were doing and how they were doing it. It's a different. It's if you were going to build it 20 years ago, this one today is probably going to use, I don't even know, maybe 10 to 15% of the power if you built that same facility 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool gig. I liked it. I really enjoyed the work and the fact that I got to see and do things that you would have never expected to do.
And you weren't expecting to get that when you first submitted that to the recruiter? You were just kind of doing it just to see, put your name in the hat kind of thing? Or
well, it was interesting because I looked at the job description and I go, I do that. I know how to do that. I do that. And then they had an older facility and they were moving into a new facility. And I literally got there and like 3 days later, I'm on a plane. I mean, I was totally green. I'm on a plane out to California to go visit Cisco's data centers and Hewlett Packard's data centers. I mean, I was totally green, totally wide-eyed. Here I am sitting in the main conference room at Cisco's headquarters, listening to their guys talking about what they're doing in their data centers. And I'm sponging this stuff in. So, a lot of what we took away from there, we looked at, we did a lot of planning, changes, things, there was different factions that wanted to design it one way. And I kept telling them it's not going to work or it's going to work. This is fluid dynamics 101. And they're looking at me like, what do you have, a master's degree? It's like, I don't even have a college degree. I just know how things work.
Yeah.
I had one of the mechanical engineers, I redesigned something and I just took a program and drew it up how it needed to be done. Went in there with a tape measure, not anything sophisticated, measured it up, did the drawing on how it needs to be done, took it to her and put it on her desk and said, this is what we need to do. And she looks at it and goes, you're doing our job for us. And I go, I'm thinking in the back of my head, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
But it was really practical application of fluid dynamics. I mean, airflow is fluid. Air is treated like a fluid. And it was really simple to understand. I mean, I'd taken physics. I didn't get the greatest grade. I think I got a C in physics, but I took enough of the practical application away to apply it to what we were doing in there. So, kind of got lucky. Had a cool campus. We'd see rattlesnakes and deer and bunnies.
Yeah. That's kind of cool to look back and think like the kid that came from his parents not thinking he was, big enough to go to the military to now you're changing, the ways things are run from data points here on out. So, I mean, it's just crazy to think about, like, if you look back and think, like, you would have never guessed where you would have ended up probably as a kid, right? Or getting out of the military.
Right. Absolutely. And to think of it in a bigger perspective, and I've never really thought about like this, but does what we did, and it's just not me, it's a lot of other people that were involved. And I'm going to say what we did and the innovations we created will have a lasting impact on the world. And how this one sector, because there was other stuff there. There was hydrogen fuel and vehicle efficiency that they would do, batteries, wind turbines. It's got all these big wind turbines out there. People go, why don't they turn? It's like, well, because they're tests. They're always turning them. They never turn them. They're testing the gearboxes and all this stuff. And so it was at the National Wind Technology Center. That was where I drove by and saw that sign. I had just finished the 53rd on the 54 list of the 14,000 foot peaks. I had one left to go.
How many people have ever done that?
I don't know what the number is now, and not everyone records it, but the Colorado Mountain Club would record it. And I think it was like of the people that recorded theirs, I was like 1228.
Okay.
So, and I still have the magazine that has my name in the back of it for doing that.
It's a cool accomplishment.
It was kind of cool. I called it Endeavor 54 was to hit them all. And I had a book from a guy named Jerry Roach. It was the guide to the 14ers. And as I would do each one, I would highlight it off. And I remember sitting down in the chair, putting the book in my lap. I had one of my favorite beers, a 1554 from New Belgium. Poured it in a glass, took a long draw off the glass, and took that highlighter and went across that last peak and was like, all right, mission accomplished. And it was like, what's next?
Yeah.
And so, moving to Colorado, and that was funny because, you move to Colorado after you've done it all and people are like living there and doing it all. And I was driving up, I'd have 4 days off from work and I would go up and hit the mountains.
Yeah.
And, fortunately I didn't really, you could feel the altitude, but I never really had altitude sickness. Sometimes I get a little bit of a headache, but it's like, all right, drink more water and take a couple aspirin. You're good.
Yeah. Dang. That's cool, man. You take a couple days off or 4 days and you're just on the road.
Right.
Just hitting it.
It'd be like
a lot of people are just taking a long weekend. You're getting it in.
Yeah. I remember leaving work on a Friday or one day, leaving work, driving to Amarillo, staying in the El Cheapo Hotel, driving to a trailhead, getting there at like 4:00 in the afternoon, looking at the weather going, it's fair weather, go. Had my stuff in the car ready to go, took off and, summited this mountain. And now all of a sudden I'm ahead of schedule, driving like a madman across the state to go finish 2 mountains that I couldn't get on because of conditions, and did those. And at one point there was a 9-day stretch where I summited 14,000 foot peaks and 3 of the unofficial 14ers.
Wow.
It was crazy. I was going, I'm putting in 12-hour days, 16-hour days in the mountains. And I would come back to camp, and the first thing I did was hit a big, gigantic protein shake, make a lot of food. And, it's 8:00 at night. I'm in bed. I'm up at 3:00 in the morning, get ready. And you're getting up and I'm like, I'm tired, but I got to go. I got to go do this. And it was the biggest push that summer was a total of 23, 14,000 foot peaks. Like, whew. Yeah.
Wow.
But it was, I wasn't married. I was single, and I was just on this mission. And I would say I was obsessed, to say the least, a little bit of obsession. But sometimes when you have a goal like that and you're driven, go for it. And that's the same thing in anything in life. If you set this goal, no matter whether it's, some outdoor pursuit like that, or it's in business, it's like, if you're driven and you're planning it, and I was definitely doing a lot of planning. I would plan my routes, where I was going to be, what days I was going to be there. And then all of a sudden in this trip, I'm like, I can go back and go do those. I can finish those that I missed on the last trip, and then back on schedule. So it was pretty interesting.
I think you got to have a little bit of a obsession to be able to complete some of your big goals. I don't think that just a casual interest in it is going to hit those big goals. Like, you got to be 100% in.
Well, you know who C.T. Fletcher is.
Right.
So he's got that one video out there. It's really good. It's called My Magnificent Obsession. And for me, that was my magnificent obsession, was to climb all the 14ers. Now, remember, I went to Nepal twice during that time period, and to Tibet to try to climb Everest. So during that whole, in that same, 7-summer period, I was out doing that stuff, and had gone to Wales and had gone to Argentina. So there was all these different things. Had gone to the Cascades. So I was, and then did all the Colorado 14ers.
Wow. That's truly amazing, man. I think it's going to be. Did you ever document any of these? Like, do you have picture books or anything?
I have a
I
few.
know a lot of people put like they're holding the sign up. And,
Yeah, I did a few pictures, but then it was kind of like, I kind of was like, okay, I really didn't, I started journaling some stuff, but I never really kept up with it because, when you're doing that many mountains in a short period of time, if I'd have sat down and thought about it, somebody asked me, I was like, why don't you write a book? And it's like, yeah, it's good enough. I have a few pictures in my archive, some of the good ones, the hero shots, and probably of all my favorite hero shots, there's one. So my mother turned 80, and Mount Evans, there's a road that drives within 243 feet of the summit, paved road. My mom was living in Georgia. I told her to bring her stuff, bring something warm. She's 80 years old. I drove her up the road, paid the $10 to go up the road, drove her up there, and then walked her up to the summit, put my climbing helmet, my ice axe on her, and took the hero shot of Mom. That was probably my favorite hero shot because there was all the hero shots, and after a while, you're standing on a pile of rocks at the top of a mountain, and I soloed so many of them. I had a few pictures I took from, different peaks. But after a while, it's just like the same. And I would literally go out some of these mountains I would go that were really popular. I would do, the Kelso Ridge, and I would hit the summit, and there'd be 50 or 60 people on the top. And as soon as I hit the top, I would keep going because I didn't want to stop and take photos of everybody. I would just keep going. It's like come right up the ridge, step my pack down, grab a snack out, start snacking on it, take my helmet off, put it on my pack, and then take off down the normal trail. And a lot of times I would get up there, if I would go really early in the morning, there'd be 3 people there. And I'm like, I'm gone, before they could even say, hey, no, I'm out. And I've done them. I set, like my personal PR going up one of them one day. It was insane. It was 3.75 miles, 3,000 vertical feet, 1 hour and 33 minutes. Oh. I was gassed at the top. I went super light. I mean, I was, no extra clothes. I don't usually use a hydration bladder, but I used a hydration bladder that day, and I'm in trail runners. So I don't really run, but I was jogging a little bit as much as I could. I'm power hiking it and just going. And I'm get to the top and hit the watch and see what the time was. And it was heart rate monitor also on it. And when I was downloaded the information, I go, dude, you were 110% of your projected heart rate at points. I mean, I was gassed. And I turned around and just, hit the top and just kept going down the trail because I wanted to get down lower where it was warmer fast. Cause down the bottom, it's 75 degrees. The top, it's 40.
Yeah.
So crazy days. I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I was a younger man then. I was still in my 50s doing that kind of stuff. But I would do it just to try it. Because I went up one day and it's like, oh, really? You're 2 hours? Oh, you can do this faster. And I wasn't even trying. I was like, well, let's see what he can do. So I trained and went up and was like, okay, all right. Never tried it again.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. I'm just going to live vicariously through you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit that many peaks, but
yeah, it was, like I said, it's an obsession, and you can always find a different obsession.
Yeah.
Find your own magnificent obsession.
I think I wanted to get my kids into hiking though. Maybe not going on huge peaks, but at least do some backcountry camping for the night, come back home or something,
So fun. Just don't tell them scary stories.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of cool spots, even like you said, close to here that you can just go hike. And they like getting out in the woods, seeing the little flowers, picking them, whatever,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think kids that get out in nature are more well-rounded than the kids that sit at home and play video games all the time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we don't even have any video game systems.
Yeah.
They got tablets, but they only get to play with those like at nighttime for a couple minutes, to wind down or whatever. But it has to be after my son goes to bed, because otherwise he is high strung when he's on a tablet. So we don't even bring those around him. But well, Kevin, I really appreciate you coming on, man. This has been our longest podcast we've had so far yet. So it's been a good one.
We'll have to edit it down, but thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all your wisdom. I'm sure we can do this again. I'm looking forward to going out and shooting with you. I keep saying I need to get out and do it. It's just been crazy busy, but I just got to schedule it and do it. But yeah, so I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you at the gym more.
Thanks much. See you then.
All right.
All right, bye.